Oh, landmines and jellyfish. Welcome back to Knives, I guess. And whew, boy, this has been one hell of a video so far, hadn't it? But do me a favor and hit that like button because I don't know, why not? But we just did a couple of live streams and we finished up Cardboard Slayer on the Benchmade Mini Bedlam. So let's take a look at what we're holding because it'll bother you if I don't. And you know I love you. So first things first, and most importantly, the pocket clip is tip up, which is the Lord's carry. We have got the black and tan Coyote G10 right here. Pocket clip is reversible. We got the axis lock and the thumb stud. Let's flick the stud. And we got 3.5 inches of S90V steel with the coating on it. So let's walk through what happened when I carried it real quick so you get an idea where we are if you haven't seen the first couple of videos. And I carried this for a week and I love it, but it's a little hard to live with. So one of the things that I really noticed is you kind of got to hold it awkward to do the axis lock without feeling like your fingy is going to be in the way of the blade closing. You know, it is doable, but man, this is an awkward grip. Like you got to hold it down here a little bit too far and it feels like, you know, you might cut yourself. The handle's a little bit on the long side for the axis lock to be this far up. You know, you can learn your way around it, you can learn how to handle it, but it took me a little while to build up some confidence with that. And the skull cracker right here, every time I reached in my pocket, I would nail this part of my knuckle right here, and it did cut it a little bit after about a week of doing that. And I hit it so hard that it felt like the knife might have opened and I might have cut myself with it once or twice. It never deployed in my pocket, but it felt like it might have because I hit the skull cracker so hard. Not a big fan of the skull cracker here. It looks like it's removable, but you lose your lanyard hole, which also isn't the end of the world. I just wanted to hang one of my alien eggs off it just to have it on there for a little while. But, you know, those were the only two gripes while carrying it. Otherwise, it was a great experience. You know, it was just a little hard to live with day to day, and I'm not sure it was intended necessarily to be carried in that pocket that way with other stuff in the pocket, but I'm not 100% sure. You know, I wasn't part of the design process. I'm not sure what their thought process was on it. So, you know, we carried it and we did Cardboard Slayer. This is our second data point on S90V, and let's start walking through the timeline of what happened here. So I've got everything written down here that happened, and, you know, we started on this thing, and we went in on it, and we started at a 191 and a 177, respectively, on our testing on the edge sharpness tester. I'm going to show you that in a little while here, but, so we started on it, and I will say right now, you know, I got to add the disclaimer because guys that haven't seen these before will say something, but we use the amount of time spent cutting as our measure of the edge wear. You know, we can't count each individual cut because we are talking about hours of cutting every second or two. We counted it and we did average it out last night, and we were averaging out about 900 cuts in around 30 minutes. It's a lot of cardboard, 900 4 to 7 inch cuts in 30 minutes. So we're going through a lot of it, you know, and we get very reliable, repeatable results. And we'll talk about some of my thoughts on that a little bit later here, but let's get into the timeline of events now that I pointed that out. So we started, again, 191, 177 on the edge sharpness tester, so not a bad edge. But we went for an hour, and, you know, at the belly towards the tip, we pulled a 548. Right about here, at the tip, we pulled a 445, and about the heel, we pulled a 336. And so that's some pretty rapid edge wear, and then we went for another 30 minutes. Another 30 minutes, and it crapped out. You know, at the worst spot, we pulled a 581, but the cuts were looking like garbage. So every super steel we've done so far, the Magna Cut, the S90V, the two S90Vs, the LMAX, they all gave up at an hour and a half. I think they all had like similar edge angles, a little bit too obtuse for what we were doing to it. Not necessarily indicative of how the factory edge would treat you day to day in other use case scenarios, but for Cardboard Slayer, they all crapped out at like an hour and a half. And someone looked online and said they're like around 20 degrees on one side and 24 on the other with the Bedlam, which is an interesting call. I'm not sure why that's there like that, but again, I wasn't part of the design process. So we stopped and sharpened it up, and it wasn't too bad to sharpen. You know, the S90V, again, it was easier to sharpen than its reputation led me to believe it'd be. The thumb studs, they were easily removable. It took a little bit of force and a couple of T6 drivers, but they came off and I was able to put them off to the side so I didn't ding these up while I was sharpening them. Always happy to see that. I put them off to the side and we put them back on at the end of the Cardboard Slayer sessions. So we sharpened her down to a 146, which is a pretty good number. It's a pretty good edge, not mad at it. And we went back in on it, and at an hour, we pulled a 326 down here in the belly and a 327 at the tip. And that was kind of checking the first ragged part of the cut on the printer paper, which we'll take a look at that in a little while too. But, so like, you know, it wasn't terrible edge wear by any stretch of the imagination. Other steels have been pushing 400s, like D2 will push the 400s when we're doing that very consistently. So we went for our next hour, and in the belly we pulled 361, and towards the tip we pulled 447. Now that is some pretty reliable edge wear that looked really consistent with what we've seen with other steels. The belly was just the first point of contact with the cardboard before we pushed through it. So those numbers are believable. At the 3 hour mark, we pulled a 643 back here in the center belly, which didn't really look right, so I retested it and got a 538. Same spot, and then towards the tip we got a 426. So I hit a slightly different area on the tip that was taking different wear, but you know that's part of why we do the multiple samples going through the evening on the cardboard slayer sessions, because that tester is not the most accurate way on the planet to measure sharpness, but it can show you on camera what kind of numbers we're looking at. There's some discussion about it. It lets me quantify something on camera for you that's otherwise really hard to show you on a video. But, so yeah, we got that 643, and then we got it down to 538, which the 538 looked really correct. Now, at the 4 hour mark, as we broke off of that and picked it back up again last night, but at the 4 hour mark, we hit a 516 right back here in the belly. Towards the front of the belly, we hit a 548, and towards the tip, we hit a 425. And those, of course, those numbers will vary as you move around the blade a little bit. So, again, general idea what's happening to it. After the next hour, we hit like a 495, we hit a 499, we hit a 456, and then we hit a 471. The numbers read a little bit lower, and I'm not sure exactly why, but maybe I was just skipping over the different small areas that were showing the worst wear. I'm not 100%. That was a little bit weird, but it was still cutting, and the cuts were still pretty clean. And that was at the 5 hour mark. We went for 30 more minutes, and the cuts turned to absolute trash. It fell off the cliff in that last 30 minutes. And we got a 658 back here in the back belly and a 648 at the tip. In the middle of those two, we got a 566. And over 600, you got a devastated edge. Over 600, the edge is devastated. You got to stop and sharpen. So we got 5.5 hours out of it. This was on a 17.5 degrees per side edge. It lasted about 30 more minutes than our last piece of S90V that was at 16.75. And of course, that 16.75 was accidental. I forgot to get the angle finder out before I started sharpening. I was very tired. So, you know, it's a close edge, but that extra 0.75 degrees is what I expected to happen. An extra 30 minutes to an hour. We were on the low end at 30 minutes. But, you know, we sharpened her again. We sharpened her down to 109. And that 109 is really nice. Like, this is my second take. The last take, I got a 104. But, like, you know, that was a nice slow drag cut, very clean cut, very precise. Let's go ahead and get the sharpness tester out so I can show you how this works. This is kindly provided by you guys through channel memberships and super chat donations, so thank you for that. I'll always be grateful for the support. But the way this thing works is it measures the number of grams of force it takes to cut through the wire on a calibrated test clip. I don't use the spool that you can reload yourself just because those are a little bit more sketch. But, you know, the wire it measures is that right there. And the reason you get all the variance on that is because you're testing an area that wide and you move the blade around a little bit on that, you get different numbers. I got a 109 last night. I got a 104 on my last take. And, I mean, this thing is sensitive enough that a little bit of paper dust from cutting that copy paper will bump your numbers up a little bit. That's part of why there's so many small variables at play. I say this gives you a general idea of what's happening. But everyone stand back. I'm arming the boy. All right, let's see what we get this time. A 109. So we got a 109 again, and I pressed that as slow as I could go, and it popped it really fast. So the 109, what I'm understanding here, and my understanding of it is, you know, you get into harder steel, it's going to take a finer edge. And I think we may have gotten past some of the more burned up steel on the edge from the factory sharpening. So we're going to go back in on this a little bit later. We're going to go back in on this and see how the second sharpening did, exposing some better steel, and maybe it'll go a lot longer, getting it down to that 109, because we gave it the same sharpening job the first and second time. You know, the only major difference is the first sharpening job, we hogged off a ton of material to get it down to 17.5 degrees per side. And the second sharpening, we were just cleaning up the same bevel at the same angle, and it was clamped in nearly exactly the same spot. So it was basically just refining the edge. And we did go for long enough that some of the coating started wearing off right here. You might be able to see that on camera, but the coating started wearing off there. So when I say we gave her what for with the cardboard, I am not kidding. We gave her what for. That was so much cardboard being cut. But, you know, like I said, this is directly comparable to the other piece of S90V that we've tried. I think the HRCs are in the same spot. And what's interesting is with the same edge on D2, we can get 4.5 to upwards of 5 hours. And I think that's because, like, the D2 on its best day is pushing 60 HRC, and these are like 61 to 63 HRC, somewhere in that window, so they're not too far off from each other. D2 is so underrated. Now, D2 has not treated me well for a little while, but good D2 with a good HRC can perform some miracles. So, and another interesting thing is, according to charts online, S90V is supposed to be significantly better at edge retention than MagnaCut is. For my testing and testing them this way, MagnaCut went damn near twice as long. And I know some guys don't like it, but we get very reliable, repeatable results with the way we measure things and the way we keep track of this. Like D2, we can get 4 hours like clockwork on a factory edge with good steel. I sharpen it to 17 degrees. We'll get 4.5 to 5 hours, pretty much like clockwork. We've had some that was at 56 HRC that went for 3 hours, which perfectly believable. The D2 on O knife tends to be a little bit soft. That'll go for about 4. It'll go for about 4 hours on a brand new edge. So we have done this with a ton of steels, but only 2 data points on S90V and only 1 on MagnaCut. So we have more data points to collect. I don't rely on just a single data point for all the information. But, you know, while we were doing the live stream, we got to talking about how these results tend to be so consistent across knife to knife to knife to knife from different factory grinds, different blade grinds and all that. And the thing is, they're all getting sharpened to pretty much identical edges. They're all getting the same fat mirrored out bevel like this. They're all getting like 17 degrees. This was 17.5, but normally I do 17. You know, on CR series steels, they'll get an 18 degree edge. But with the same edge geometry, apparently that's leveling the playing field out quite a bit, because no matter what the grind on D2 is, we've been getting the same results pretty much every single time unless something is catastrophically wrong with that D2. And then it'll tell you something's catastrophically wrong because it will not take an edge. You can sharpen it all you want. I've had D2, bad D2. We did the work sharp, wouldn't get it sharp. We did freehand, wouldn't get it sharp. We did the belt grinder, wouldn't get it sharp. You know, went out to the 2x72, hogged off a ton of material, took it back to the belt grinder, would not get it sharp. So, you know, that's part of why we do this, is we check out the edge, we check out the steel, we check out the heat treatment somewhat, we check out the ergonomics. We get some data from this. And I will say with this thing, the ergonomics were phenomenal. Oh my God, the ergonomics were so good. This is now tied for first place with the Buck 110 for the most comfortable thing I have ever used over the course of a lot of Cardboard Slayer sessions. I didn't even feel discomfort from the pressure on my hand right here while I was doing all the push cuts. Normally good ergonomics, I will still feel a lot of pressure here. But, you know, holding this and doing my push cuts, it did not bother me one bit. It was so comfortable. I was so grateful to be using something that didn't really tear my hand up for the Cardboard Slayer session. You know, overall, I'm in love with this thing. You know, the price tag is still the price tag. There's been a lot of griping and discussion about it. Personally, I'm not a fan of how expensive they are, but mostly because I can't afford them, and I understand they are expensive for the blade steels and the materials used. However, again, where I come into being of two minds about it is I do know Benchmade pays their employees, the guys making these things and building these things, a good living wage. I know they pay them pretty well, especially compared to what other companies are paying their employees. They're not shipping their manufacturing out to China, where they're paying pennies on the dollar for the manufacturing. So I know that factors into the price, and there's still a bit of the butterfly tax. So while I don't like how high the prices are, I do understand what's going on behind some of that pricing. You know, on Benchmade, if you guys see this, like, you've got my honest opinion about it now. And, you know, overall, I love this thing. A little bit hard to live with day to day, but man, it was good it was fun showing it off to coworkers and stuff like that. It was nice carrying it outside of basically the dingus into the skull cracker hitting my hand so much. I love the build quality. I love the comfort in hand when I'm doing something with extended pressure, like extended push cuts, that many of them, and it being that comfortable, I'm in love with. The build quality, I'm in love with. You know, now that I'm used to the axis lock and opening and closing it with some confidence, I'm happy there. But man, that price tag, you know, and this is not the heartbeat of the channel. The heart of the channel is, of course, finding stuff in the $50 or less range, you know, the budget end. This is not our usual fare. This is not what the channel's all about, but it's really nice to check something out. And, you know, the feel of the quality is really nearly impossible to articulate on camera properly. The only way you can really notice the difference between this and the magnitude of the difference between this and a budget knife is holding it for yourself and handling it for yourself. You know, personally, I feel like this is very, very well built. I feel like the fit and finish are great. That being said, I don't have a lot of other knives in this price range to really compare it to, so do with that information what you will. But this is not one of the crown jewels of my collection. This is one of my favorite knives I've got. I absolutely love this thing. You know, it's right up there. This is right up there with the Mayhem. You know, I love them for two radically different reasons, but, you know, the ones that are the crown jewels in the collection are all there for very different reasons. You know, this right here, you can see it. I love my comically oversized stuff, and this, it's just good. It's just good. I feel like it may have been intended to carry in a pack or carry on your chest or something like that. Or it's intended to have the option of just removing the skull cracker, but I don't see spacers to replace that. I'm not 100% sure. Benchmade, if you guys see this, could you provide some clarity on this? Because, like, this is the only huge gripe. You know, I could learn my way around the awkward grip to close it, but that skull cracker, there's no way around that without grinding it down. So, like, at this point, I'm just holding you hostage, but you guys know I love sharing with you what happened during Cardboard Slayer. That's what happened with this thing during Cardboard Slayer. So, all that being said, thanks for looking at my crap. Subscribers, you guys are awesome. Y'all keep coming in. I appreciate you so, so much. If you haven't subscribed, please do. We got live streams, regular videos. There's plenty of activities. Comments, I love some feedback. Let me know what you think about this thing, the price, the quality, everything else. Let's say thank you to Ace on Knives for making this possible. This was a gift from him. And we're going to plug some products from friends of the channel. They're not affiliate links. I don't make any money off them. I do have my Amazon shop. Use it or don't. That's up to you. But just supporting some friends of the channel. And here you go. And as always, we are going to link up to Cutting Lacey EDC's Diamond Emulsion if you want to step your stropping game up, make it easier to sharpen your blades, and keep them sharp. Wonderful product. I use it myself on every single knife I sharpen now. And we are going to link up to Mad Yocco's Wax. If you want to protect your blades that are prone to corrosion, if you want to darken up the color of your micarta, or take care of a million other things, he is going to be on Blade Binge with his wax. Alright, just supporting some friends of the channel and some small businesses. Alright, y'all have a nice day.